Been looking forward to this episode for such a long time. I get to sit down with the head of strategic sourcing with the BBC, a guy who's got 17 years in the industry across multiple disciplines, and he's gone in and created a brand new function inside the BBC. Strategic sourcing essentially is going in and being the headhunters for the wider organization. It doesn't mean replacing the talent acquisition team. It doesn't mean taking out all of the external agencies, but it's giving yourself a resource internally that gives you strategic sourcing elements. Here is what you've got coming up in the next half an hour.
I think the important thing is to realize it's not one tool. You need to use all of the tools within your arsenal. Number one, first and foremost, will be on the ground experience. If we have people working in that bureau and they've got on the ground knowledge, let's utilize and harness that. How did they make their journey to the BBC? How did they find out about the roles? From their experience, what are the best routes to finding candidates? Now we know what the regular things are needed. Let's just start building out those pools of people. Let's not try and find every front-end engineer that you can find. Let's find the ones that we know, these are the companies that we recruit from. And then you start building them, but you make it curated. You make it 200 of the best front-end engineers, or you make it 100 of the best project managers that you can find. And then it's our job to curate. And I think that's the next stage, is that we're building these pools, but we need to nurture them.
Genuinely, one of my favorite conversations I've had to date. I cannot stress enough how important this episode is going to be for the future of 2025 talent acquisition and beyond. Like I said, it doesn't replace what's there, it adds to it. It gives you a new dynamic. It gives your team focus with strategic hiring. I hope you get as much out of this as I did. And if you do want to connect with Darren and continue the conversation, I highly, highly recommend it. His LinkedIn is in the footnotes. So thanks so much. Looking forward to hearing the feedback. Welcome to Tea Time with Talent Acquisition, the podcast aimed at fostering knowledge and sharing stories within the vibrant talent acquisition community. I'm your host, Eden, and for the next hour or so, I'm going to be joined by a 17-year veteran of the talent acquisition world. He'd worked across the full recruitment spectrum, starting out at the agency, landing in RPOs, and finally in-house, where he's worked for some of the world's best-known companies. Some you might have also heard from GE, Deloitte, and BBC. His career and passions lie in hyper-focused continuous improvement in everything TA. Candidate experience, employer branding, data-first decisions, and constant process evolutions are all things that his division are sick of hearing about from him. His latest role as the head of strategic sourcing at the BBC has allowed him to harness that passion to build from scratch a unique industry-leading and globally reaching future. Apologies.
All right, man.
Vicky, edit this one. Sorry.
That's all right.
Well, she's going to laugh at that one. Right. His latest role as the head of strategic sourcing at the BBC has allowed him to harness that passion to build from scratch a unique industry-leading, globally reaching, and future-critical TA function for one of the most recognizable brands on the planet. And that's where this conversation comes from. How to build a TA function, or at least utilize a TA function when you're sourcing on a genuine global scale. So when you're ready, grab your favorite tea or coffee if you prefer, and join me in welcoming today's guest, the head of sourcing at the BBC, Darren Read. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much for having me, and I've got my coffee ready.
Oh, nice. I mean, I've gone for tea, so I have to do it. I mean, we're supporting both sides of it, shall we say?
Exactly, the full spectrum covered.
Well, look, from my side, I know we've spoken a few times about this topic, and I'm super excited about kind of jumping into it because I think you have such a unique situation at the BBC, and I'll let you explain it. That it's really not going to translate like for like to any of our listeners, if we're completely honest. But when we talk about scaling on hiring on a global scale, there's so many things that you and your team have experienced that we could definitely learn from, and that could be translated to when you're hiring, engineers in another country or, salespeople in another continent, whatever. And I think that's the takeaways that I'm really hoping to kind of peel away from what you've learned throughout your time. But before we get into the nitty gritty, if you've listened to any of the episodes, you probably would expect this question. If not, your face is going to drop. Let's see. So the first question I'd like to understand for everyone is, from your perspective, what makes a high-performing recruitment team?
Diversity of thought. I think that's really the main thing for me, is that you can have a great number of multi-threats in your TA team in the nicest way possible. You know, they've got multiple discipline skill sets. They come with lots of different things, but you need the diversity of thought for high performance, to give you the right feedback, to make sure that you're being the best leader that you can be. And really where I am now is making sure that we're bringing as much diversity of thought to represent the audience that we're meant to be, working for, essentially, at the BBC. So that's the first thing that came to my mind. I've probably got about 50 million other things, but diversity of thought is right at the top.
I mean, peel back that a second again then. So when you're looking at hiring to your team, building your team and your function, how do you go and explore diversity of thought? Are we looking for diverse people, or you can find that, because in theory you can find diversity of thought from a same group of people from different backgrounds? What does it mean a little bit more?
You can, yeah. I suppose they sort of go hand in hand to a degree, because it will be different life experiences, different cultural elements that someone might bring to the team. So it's considering both. It's diversity of thought and diversity as a whole. Obviously you want to make sure that, that diversity is not done from a tokenistic perspective. You want to make sure that it's very genuine diversity that you're looking for. But yeah, I think, I've skill mapped my team. I knew that when I came into the organization, I need these particular skill sets in order to be able to achieve. I was lucky to inherit a small team when I joined, because it was part of a structural change at the BBC. So I very quickly understood their capabilities and where they needed to upskill. And then I was able to go and build out my team based on that. So, for me, it's incredibly important. And you are seeing it a lot more now, but organizations like the BBC can be a little bit slower to the uptake just because of the size and nature of them. But, it was really important to me to have as many data experts as possible, people that really understand data, not just creating formulas on Excel, but, understanding the narrative that you get from data. How do we visualize this? How do you use this to make a convincing argument to a hiring manager that they might need to change their tact? Those types of things. So, data was one of the really big things for me. And I think that from a candidate experience perspective, that's also massive. You've seen people experience teams popping up over the last couple of years all over the place because there's so much more of a hyper focus on it. I want people that truly understood that kind of white glove service from a recruitment perspective, especially because my team, strategic sourcing, does the headhunting. We don't deal with the overall arching 360 management of a role internally. We don't deal with the approvals at the beginning. We don't deal with approvals at the end and organising the interviews. We are very much that kind of, front-facing headhunting. We are the first person you might hear from at the BBC, and we're here to entice you to work for the BBC. So making sure that candidate experience is absolutely prime was a really big thing for me as well.
I love the fact that you're saying about the diversity, because I think, if you take a look at the last year, I feel like in some organizations, diversity has really taken a back foot. And it's not really getting the attention that it needs to have. And the conversation, the part you're just sharing there, it really reminds me of a conversation I had with a lady called Jen, who works at an organization called BPP.
I know Jen, BBC. Jen Holm.
Yeah. That is, yeah, correct. And it's very, very similar to what she's saying. Data is the driving force of decisions, and we need people to understand that. And obviously coming from a diverse group of people to understand. So it's really nice to hear two people in completely different organizations, close in two completely different audiences having a similar mindset. It's probably also because I think you're both in the same group. The one that we were on, I forgot now what it is. Talent
community. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, look, from that sense, Darren, let's kind of springboard into what we want to talk about, which is,
Sure.
the main bulk of sourcing at a global scale. So I do a lot of recruitment in mainland Europe. I work with a lot of startups to scale ups. And, when we talk about scaling, we're talking maybe 100, 200 roles at one time over the course of a year, which is hyper growth. It is good growth. But BBC, you've got a much, much bigger, broad scope, and you're hiring all over the world. So when you talk about global scale, explain to me and explain to the listeners, what does that actually mean for you and for your team?
Sure. There aren't many places on the planet that the BBC doesn't have a presence in some way, shape or form. So it really is truly a global scale. We see a lot of our work come through from our news bureaus in various locations.
Right.
And each have their own specific regional foibles, as it were. There's lots to consider when you're trying to recruit for those particular locations, culturally, from a legal perspective, what fits in with that particular office. So it's interesting because coming from a predominantly tech background, both from energy engineering and then through to tech engineering, as it were, having to really change my mindset to understand the differences between those types of recruitment it's an evolving challenge. There are 952 job titles at the BBC overall. So trying to have an inherent knowledge of all of those is nigh on impossible. So that's where the strategic part comes in. You look at where the hiring volumes are and you make experts in those regions, because you having a driver that you recruit for that might come up 3 times a year is not the same as trying to recruit for senior journalists in Hong Kong, for example. So lots of different challenges there. I think really how I approached this when I started the strategic sourcing team at the BBC was I made it very clear at the beginning that I was gathering information first of all. I wasn't going to make any massive decisions or changes or any swathing strategies based on what I didn't know. It was all purely like gathering information for the first part of it. So that was looking at historical hiring data, looking where the global hotspots were, what they were recruiting, what types of jobs they were recruiting, and that really brought to the forefront that need for that understanding data narrative. We can gather the data and we can get this information in, but unless we do something meaningful with it, there's not really much point. So it was understanding what we're doing in those locations, and they are genuinely some of them very difficult locations to recruit into for a number of reasons. I'll give you Vietnam as an example.
I was going to say, just because obviously when we're talking about challenges, you've alluded to a few things around it, but before obviously you took the role, correct if I'm wrong, Darren, you started as a freelancer with them, right? And then you joined them permanently.
A bit of a complicated journey in terms of recruitment. So I moved from Deloitte to the BBC to be a recruitment manager for their technology recruitment. I was there up until 2022 while I tried my hand at startup. I was only there for a short amount of time because I realised that it wasn't the right fit for me. I'd always operated in massive hypermatrixed organisations, wanted to try my hand at something very different, and I just think the style of startup wasn't particularly for me. My mindset wasn't in that kind of hyper growth, across absolutely everything sort of space. I was used to operating, in a bit of a different way of working, which sad to figure out that it wasn't for me, but at the same time, really good to understand where my passion lies. So, I came back to the BBC as a freelancer initially to look after some recruitment. And there was a TA restructure program, and it really gave us the firepower that we needed in TAIR that we've been asking for such a long time for. So a dedicated sourcing team, which is what I now lead, an employer brand team, a dedicated exec search team. There were all these like new tranches of recruitment that were really helping reinvent recruitment at the BBC. So I was asked if I wanted to lead the strategic sourcing function, and leapt at the chance because it was always something that I thought was missing from the BBC. So that's my journey in the BBC, away from and then back to the BBC.
Obviously, you already knew some of the challenges that you were going to face then. So set the scene then. I know you were alluding to one just a second ago, the Vietnam situation. So tell us a little bit about what some of these challenges are, and maybe some of the challenges that you haven't foreseen, because that's also part of hiring on a global scale, is that we know what we know, but there's always so many unknowns that we don't know. So kind of talk us through some of those examples.
Yeah, I think that the Thailand one is a really good example because it's got lots of different implications. So a lot of our international assignments are complex on a number of different levels, and it could be due to cultural things. It could be political reasons, given the BBC stance as a free media organisation operating in particular locations. We have a bureau in Thailand, and we were looking to get Vietnamese speaker journalists that would be able to join our organisation. Now, Vietnam is a country, I believe it's communist, so there was a lot of kind of hesitation for people that would want to attach their name, being a Vietnamese national, because that's generally what they were. The people that we were recruiting, they would have been Vietnamese nationals that had moved across to Thailand. So we were operating in a really tiny pool, trying to find people that were willing to take the risk to work for a free media organisation. And there just weren't that many Vietnamese speaking journalists that were based in that country. So Sophie and Satnam on my team, two genuinely fantastic sources, did an amazing project to look for transferable skills, people that were doing more social media, or they were editing content, or it was all these kind of journalistic adjacent skills that we were trying to say, we found you Vietnamese speakers. They might not be journalists, but they've got a lot of the core components of what you need, and it would be an element of retraining. So that was
just to
really
chime in a second. Sorry. So this is the research part you're talking about now, right?
Yeah.
So you've got the problem that people weren't willing to attach themselves to the free media situation in that location. You've identified it, and instead of just hitting your head against a brick wall, so to speak, and saying, "Oh, we'll get there eventually. We'll find them eventually." You've taken a step back and gone, "Okay, how can we do this? Let's research that part a little bit further."
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've had to get really comfortable with in my new role is constructively pushing back or saying no. Because rather than being like, we need these journalists, go and find them, it's like, oh, we can't find you them, or we'll just keep sending CVs that aren't quite right. What we've done is we've created, or hopefully I've given the safety to my team to understand that they can push back constructively and say, we can't find this thing, and here's the evidence to back it up. We're not just saying it anecdotally. But this is what we can find. And we've found this out through research. We found out through talking to candidates and understanding what their pushbacks might be. We've done a full analysis of competitors in Thailand to understand how many people are at those companies, what their job titles are. We found these people.
How do you do that? Sorry, if you don't mind me asking.
Yeah.
Just because I think that's going to be something super important to, especially competitive analysis. We've all access to some tools, not all, but how are you deciding, the validity of a tool to get to that, and what tool do you use?
I think the important thing is to realize it's not one tool. You need to use all of the tools within your arsenal. Number one, first and foremost, will be on the ground experience. If we have people working in that bureau and they've got on the ground knowledge, let's utilize and harness that. How did they make their journey to the BBC? How did they find out about the roles? From their experience, what are the best routes to finding candidates? Is there a meetup that they all attend that we have no idea about that we can get a representative to go there for? So that's the on the ground element. Then there's the more traditional sourcing tools. So, before X-ray searching died a death not that long ago, that was a very real option for us, going into Google and getting the most out of X-ray searching. You've obviously got
to some degree. It's just not.
It's not like it used to. Yeah, used to. Yeah, I ran a refresher course. Not me personally. We brought in a provider. Ran a refresher course for my sourcing team on X-ray searching, and then I think less than a month later, it was completely changed in terms of how it works.
Yeah. So it still works. I think if you run an X-ray search on Google with and you put PDF or Word documents, that still works quite well.
Yeah,
for most.
There are ways around it.
I'm talking about for the engineering roles.
Of course.
Maybe trying to find journalists might be a little bit more challenging because obviously engineers are more likely to put their CV somewhere on GitHub or whatever. But it does; those still work. But for your part, maybe not as much.
So because of the change, and it's because of the different type of individual you're recruiting for, you do have to look at these different things. So there are journalist job boards, there are communities of journalists, those kind of gated communities that operate outside of your traditional LinkedIn and things like that.
Yeah,
we've got other tools that we've got access to. We use one called Seek Out, which is a great aggregator, which scrapes the internet and finds people for you. That looks at LinkedIn and other major job sites. That's been something that's been very useful for us. But we have a multitude of tools that we would use, some of which are specific to industries, some of which are slightly more generic. For example, with our technology recruitment, UK focused predominantly, but we use HackerJob and we use that to great effect. We were named as their Employer of the Year very recently, which is great news to hear. But there are, because of the different varieties and the 950 job titles we do recruit for, there's a real wealth of tools that we might use to go to the market. So we would use those in your more kind of direct sourcing capacities, or to understand about the makeup of companies or competitors in those particular areas. So a lot of it is research via different methods and channels that we would really go about doing, and then pulling that together into a meaningful presentation or Excel document that's digestible for managers so they can see what we're talking about has that backup data with it.
Yeah. I mean, by the way, that I don't go to that depth. I'll be transparent. As an external, there's only so much research I do. My approach is very, very similar in the sense of, if I have a gut feeling about something, I'll always voice it on the first call and say, like, Darren, I don't think we're going to get it.
Yeah.
These are your parameters. I'll work towards them. Give me a week and I'll come back to you with the data. And the data is always going to be, obviously not necessarily boots on the ground, so to speak, but I'll go speak to candidates that I know. I'll go speak to people in that network and find out pushbacks, challenges, and then come back with the same information. But
Yeah.
I gravitate more towards LinkedIn Insights, my own
Yeah.
first degree network, Slack channels,
Mhm.
and then generally just people that I've got good relationships with in the industry to say, look, what do you think? Other hiring managers, what do you think about this sort of parameters? And kind
Yeah.
of get insights that way.
Yeah.
I agree. You have to kind of learn to say no in a constructive way.
Definitely. And I think crowdsourcing is one of the things that I think I personally struggle with, not to make this too much of a therapy session, but I was really awful at asking for help, particularly. So I was never good at like admitting on a forum that I had a problem that I needed fixing. But it's something that has been really eased a lot over the last couple of years. And resources like the talent community or the in-house recruiter network or
not allowed in that one.
Hired, those types of things, just going out and kind of saying, does anyone have any experience with this? And, thankfully, us TA lot are a quite amiable bunch, so they will jump in and help where possible.
I think this is the same thing with this. I was going to say with the podcast and whatnot, I think how we connected is that I put up a post saying, I've got a free slot, who wants it? And you said, yeah, I'll fancy a bit of that. And I think it's like a testament to what we do. Like the tools that you just shared there, for example, Seek Out. I've never heard of that in my life.
Right.
Someone else might have, but someone else might not have. And it's just another opportunity for us to say, okay, there's a new tool there that could be really good for someone else's circumstance. And if that's the only thing they end up taking away from this, then great. Only 19 minutes in, they can log off now.
There you go.
So obviously research is a absolute cornerstone of what you and your team are obviously doing before. Do you do research before any sourcing takes place? Or if you've got an idea, you go, right, we know what we're doing there, let's just go do it. So again, if it's strategic sourcing, I'm just curious to see kind of what your level of research is, if it's the same for every single process.
Definitely. So it's not the same for every single process. And, I'm very lucky to work with expert sources in various different fields. And I'll very much leave it to them to decide what they want to do in that particular scenario. I'm a very hands-off leader in that respect because I don't feel like being over people's shoulders is particularly productive. I've hired them to do the job and the accountability is there to get it done. So if they feel like they need to go and research something, then they should. That being said, if you've done a piece of research 2 months before of all the SRE engineers in London, then you probably don't need to do that piece of work again. So there are instances where it makes sense. And I think that one of the kind of big things that we did when I first started the team is that it was January 2022 when strategic sourcing came into effect. And that was bang in the middle of global tech layoffs, like right in the middle of everything. Meta was letting people go. Spotify let people go. Google was letting people go. Amazon had done, I think, a tranche, a little bit later. But that was a really good opportunity for my team to understand what we're trying to achieve. I broke down what we needed, what we recruited the most within technology, and I had a smaller team back then. But each of those expert sources went out and they mapped all of the product managers that were leaving those organizations globally. They found all of the front end, back end, full stack engineers that were leaving those organizations. They found the project managers that were tech adjacent. And we decided that we would break it down like that to find the people that we needed, UX engineers, all of that type of thing. So that was our first foray into strategic sourcing. It was like, right, go and research all of this because let's research it. Let's map it out. Let's bring it to our chief product officer, Storm Fagan, and be like, we're here. Here's all this work that we've done. Here are the people that we think we can afford. Here are the people that we know are interested in working at the BBC. How about we have a coordinated approach and bring these people in?
Yeah. That's a really good timing as well for the fact that you've got a market situation that's led a project. Yeah. Which is then ultimately, I assume you made hires off the back of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. We made a lot of hires off it. Yeah. It's one of those things where in the first 2 years of strategic sourcing, we've been predominantly reactive because we've been building up our business internally. Essentially, we've been, I do use a lot of like agency analogy, but we've been building our desks internally, realistically. And now we're at the position where, we've always had that proactive element, but now we're able to have a truly blended model where it's going to be more proactive than reactive because we've got the data about what we know, what we need. The business are doing a lot better with strategic workforce planning. So rather than just jumping on things that need doing, we've got the solutions before the problems even arise.
With that, I want to touch upon this because this is a really area that I mean, we had this chat before. I'm so passionate around the reactive, proactive element, and obviously talent pool development. And getting it right, I think that's going to be fundamentally crucial to success in 2025. Before I do that, I have one kind of segue back because obviously, when you're talking about research, it is a project.
Yes,
right? Research is a project. It's not directly hiring, and it does always sometimes be: are we doing too much project work and not enough hiring? Or, we need to strike the balance. So for you as a leader, how do you get that across to your team? Because we still need to make hires, right? You can't just sit back and say, cool, I've just done 2 weeks worth of projects, no hires, no one's moved through the funnel.
Yeah.
You need to justify what our desk is sometimes. Again, back to you. How as a leader, how are you understanding this is vital, right? This is important versus it's going to bring us something in the future, that sort of thing.
Yeah, once again, so many variables involved in those types of scenarios, but a lot of it is learned experience. A lot of it is what we've learned to date within the 2 years that we've been doing sourcing is, we have a track of all of the live roles we've got, all of the projects that we're doing from a mapping perspective. I know where those are assigned to within the team and who's working on them, when that project started, what stage it's at. We have a pretty comprehensive way of tracking those things. So for me, I'm always kind of head deep in spreadsheet, looking at those particular types of things.
Please don't tell me when you say spreadsheet. Please tell me that's just a phrase you're saying. You don't actually have the spreadsheet. Surely you've got a dashboard that you see as a team or something.
So we've got something that visualizes the information that comes out of it.
Okay, cool. I was going to say.
Yeah.
I know BBC is somewhat a little bit slower in some regards, but come on, we're not still on Excel spreadsheets for everything.
No. So the information is come out and is visualized, but a lot of the information does actually come from me being like head deep in like raw data for someone. So and I'm okay with that because that's how I operate. We have a complicated ATS. We're working on getting our CRM up and running as well, which is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting for us, and we are using capabilities of that. But it's I think it's just really understanding where people's, what people are working on. And then the priorities is really what they feel and what I feel at the same time. It's like, well, I think an assistant project manager that you've been asked to work on ranks incredibly low for us, not because it's not needed for the business, but because because the job is lower down in the experience scale. We know that the BAU recruitment team, which is your typical 360 recruiters that look at applications, they're going to get 300, 400 applications for that. There is no point of us getting involved in that. However, if we're trying to find a principal SRE engineer in Salford, we know that's search activity because no one's going to be applying for it. They're super in demand. The market's predominantly day rate led because they can earn lots of money as contractors. So that's pure search activity that we would take on. That's where the strategic element comes in, is we would look at where we can avoid the most cost rather than sending out to an agency, where we can reduce the time that it might take to hire, and where we would have the most strategic view on if that's a diversity lever that we need to pull within the business. So there are a whole load of factors that go into looking at it. But it's kind of a mix of everything. It's what we've learned to date versus the kind of business importance. And there isn't a formula that I've created. There isn't like a decision tree that's perfectly mapped out for every one of those scenarios. Some of it is unfortunately that good old recruiter gut feeling.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. By the way, as you're speaking, I actually love this element of strategic sourcing. The more you're talking about it, the more I'm feeling this is exactly what most scaling companies need. And I'm making myself a little bit redundant in this next comment, but I do think it works. If you have a small team, 5, 6 people that are actively headhunting, and then the remainder of your teams are your schedulers, your applications, and I'm thinking business like Klarna, we all know, right?
Yep.
The business like Klarna might have this. I don't know. If someone listens from Klarna, please tell me. But I think that would work so perfect. And then you have your external RPO, recruiters, whatever, and they then join the strategic team as a extension, not an extension of your entire recruitment team. You don't need us to go find mid front-end developers, but you might need us to find a staff front-end developer, and that's the strategic side. And Absolutely. Then you become one big happy team, external, internal.
Yeah.
This is a really good model.
Look, it's something I'm proud of. It's something I'm hearing a lot more happening across kind of other businesses. I did a talk at RecFest this year. I'm not trying to like shout from the rooftops about it. I'm not like trying to be Mr. Big about
Breakfast,
it
by the
or
way, if no
anything.
one has been, I do highly recommend it.
Yeah,
I'll put the links. I didn't go this year. My other half went this year. I went last year. We have to
yeah,
take it in turns who looks after the little one while
yeah,
it's on. So I'm there next year. So if you are there,
yeah.
Darren, I'll pop and say hello. But continue.
Absolutely. So I was really lucky to meet a lot of people that had either started on a similar journey than what we'd done or were looking to do something very similar. So
Yeah.
talking to representatives and lots of big matrixed organizations, a couple of people from like rapid or hypergrowth kind of companies as well. So I think it's coming more to the forefront. And it's a big cost initially, which is I think what a lot of people need to get their head around is you've got to build a team, that's salaries, you've got to get your pipeline up and running, you've got to build tech, you've got to get the processes in place, you've got to sell what you're doing, you've got to integrate into a talent acquisition team that might feel a particular way about someone coming in to help them with headhunting. You have to overcome the objection that sourcing is the entry level point to recruitment. That's the big one. Often you start an agency, you might be a sourcer, and then you'll move from a sourcer to a consultant. And I think that mentality has probably shifted a little bit over the last few years, but there is still that mentality.
Different career
sourcing as a junior. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Some great sources are terrible account managers, and some account managers are awful sources. Rarely do you find someone who's great at both. And to be fair, I think in the next 5-10 years, they just won't exist.
Yeah.
We'll all be retired.
There's a good shout to say that everyone's going to be moving to talent management, that it will be you managing the journey of that candidate for the whole life cycle of their time with that company, from finding them to onboarding them, to making sure their performance is tied to your viability as the hire. So I think that's where you're going to see the market go over the next 10 to 15 years. We're
going to have to pin that one for a future episode, because I quite like the futuristic version of what recruitment's going to look like. Anything that doesn't involve the word AI, I'm there just because I'm bored of listening to it.
Me too.
I like that concept. No, but I think genuinely strategic sourcing has a very interesting perception, not just in the big companies, but even in, like I said, scaling companies.
Yeah.
I can see the value in what a team like that would do. But going back to actually what we stopped at the beginning, there was the element and we went right off. There was the element of talent pool development.
Yes.
And reactive versus proactive. So explain to me what a reactive state looked like for your team. Yeah. And now what does a proactive state look like?
Yeah. So reactive state for our team was really the first year, I would say, like 80% plus reactive in terms of how we were working. And that would be, hi, Darren, I've got this role that I've not been able to fill. We've put it out to advert once or twice. It's not come in. Can your team have a look at it? That's really the vast majority of our wins that came through in year one was looking at that type of work. So it was reinventing the wheel every time. It was, going out and trying to find a senior technical architect, or going out trying to find a lead producer in BBC Audio or something to that effect. And that, from a global perspective, that could have been anything. It could have been looking for someone that's an operations engineer in Washington. It could have been looking for someone that's a journalist in Kenya. Lots of those types of requests coming in. Where we've then moved to the more proactive model is, right, okay, now we know what we've done in the past. We had the data from the get-go about how we hired over the last 5 financial years. We've built up a base of data from year one of doing what we're doing. Now we know what the regular things are needed. Let's just start building out those pools of people. But let's not make it a pool of 5,000 people. Let's not try and find every front-end engineer that you can find. Let's find the ones that we know. These are the companies that we recruit from. These are the people that are interested in what the BBC is doing, because that's a big one. We are, I think it's fair to say, a divisive company, I think, for a lot of people.
Marmite.
Yeah, Marmite is a good way to describe it. You're rarely down the middle. How we're funded makes it emotive, but people are either very for or sort of not really for the BBC's, what the BBC stands for, and it's finding those people that are willing to come along, because there are sometimes, tech is a great example, and you'll understand this. We don't pay amazingly well. We're a mid-market payer at best. So those people that we lose to Meta that go for, big money in data roles, we want to entice them back, but that's not a possibility. I'm sure every other company's like this, but we will forever struggle finding software engineering team leads because it's that perfect mix of people management and technical knowledge. And that comes at a price. And unfortunately, we're priced out a lot in the market for that. We do find fantastic people, but we have to think about it as like not a direct match. We have to think about it as let's find the people with potential to move into that role. So that's how we're building pools, is understanding where those problem areas are. With the research that we've done to that date is understanding what the drivers are and what companies we tend to take people from, or want to come to us, or what communities or groups or, specialist interest areas people might want to join us from. And then you start building them, but you make it curated. You make it 200 of the best front-end engineers, or you make it 100 of the best project managers that you can find. And then it's our job to curate. And I think that's the next stage, is that we're building these pools, but we need to nurture them. We need to make sure that they're engaged with the BBC's proposition. And that's where our fantastic employer brand team come in, and they do amazing work. And it's about making sure that we're properly connecting up those dots and getting the information out about what the BBC's doing. A fireside chat with our CTO, or here's this really cool piece of work that we've done, from a technical perspective that people can look at, or talking about all these amazing things that happen in BBC's R&D, so there's kind of anything along there, and we've got the pools and we just need to maximize them.
Like I said, I wholeheartedly believe in that approach. And taking it back to an agency, that's what agencies do. That's why you go to an agency, is they had the pool of people waiting to go. And I'm seeing more teams doing. I'm seeing some teams struggle, not necessarily understanding what they're doing, and they're going after 5,000. And I'm seeing people in this case who have the talent pool, but then struggling to make the connection. One person who does it really well, if you don't have the luxury of having a marketing team, there's a guy called Sean Kennedy, which he's also in our Slack channel, by the way. But I will also tag him into this when I post it. But Sean, he got 1 million impressions on his own LinkedIn posts with no money.
Oh, really?
He could, his team, his company, basically, they gave him free reign to go do what he wanted to do.
Right.
But there was no funding behind it. And, he now basically has, I think he's just got mentioned on LinkedIn editor for some of the work he's doing. So basically, he just connects the dot. Who are the people that he wants to target? So the types of profiles, their backgrounds, etc., etc. And then he curates marketing material around that, either from himself or from people in the team that will target parents, that will target flexible working, that target getting back to work, that sort of thing. And he now understands fully, this is what we hire on a repeat basis. These are the talent pools I'm after, and he's now on that marketing bit himself. So you don't need the marketing team behind you. You just need to have a little bit of a lack of camera shy sometimes. But that's one thing. But that's where teams should go. And then you utilize external support when you're sitting there going, holy shit, we still can't find a person. And now we need help. And that's where the next step comes in. But the talent pool development is absolutely critical.
Definitely. And it's something I'm really conscious of, because I feel like it's something that I need to develop a lot more. Not my personal brand in the LinkedIn space, but understanding and harnessing social media a lot more for recruitment. And the employer brand team do really good work in that, but I want to translate that to my sourcing team. I want to understand the intricacies of how we can get people on TikTok or Instagram to engage with us and hire that way. Because if we just focus on LinkedIn and the specialist tools out there, we'll get the job done, but we're not developing, we're not advancing. And this is, to coin a tech phrase that I use a lot with my team, it's CI/CD, continuous improvement, continuous development. I treat sourcing
good old infrastructure.
I treat sourcing like a software release. Like it's about incremental changes and the flexibility and the agility to stop doing something if it's not working. There's no point of carrying on with it if it's a process. And that can sometimes be difficult in a big scale organization. I'm very lucky to have the backing of my boss, who does give me that autonomy to change things from a sourcing perspective. And that's how we treat it. It's like, right, that's not working. Let's stop doing that. Let's tweak this here. As long as it doesn't have any implications on a wider breaking of processes elsewhere, then let's just do it. Let's take that approach. So it's I feel really, really strongly about that kind of agility in how we work and and how we can adapt things. And social media, I just need to get around it a lot more. I'm just really bad at it, not only professionally but personally as well.
I'm better professionally than I am personally. I can't be bothered with social media personally. I have an Instagram account that I just watch outdated TikTok videos on.
Sounds about right. Yeah, that's
like the other 30-year-olds out there that do the same thing. But other than that, yeah, I mean, social media for what that's it. Darren, it's been a genuine pleasure. I was so looking forward to this for the right reasons, and I think there's a lot of good insights that people can take away from. Simply, like I said, the research have been so critical, being able to utilize that, but the strategic sourcing function, being headhunters yourselves, and then kind of driving that. I think that's so important. If someone wants to continue the conversation with you, where's the best place that they can find you?
LinkedIn's probably the best place to reach out to me because it's the one social media platform that I'm on the most, even though I'm not on many. But yeah, please reach out on LinkedIn. Very happy to have any kind of conversation with you. Always keen to understand what other people are doing. And I'm not shy about sharing the keys to the success of what we've had here, at all. So yeah, reach out on LinkedIn and we can set something up.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Cheers, Eden. Thanks.